Hello, this is Matt O'Leary. Let's do this thing. 2019's been a strange and very exciting year for me. I started working this new half job, actually writing and producing a new podcast. I'm also hosting it, so I'm, vocally performing, if you will, sort of. It's kind of written and scripted like This American Life, but it's all about marketing and influence, which I never thought I would be involved in any capacity whatsoever. But it's coming out in early 2020 sometime, and I'm very, very thrilled. I feel like Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'm thrilled. I'm also writing the little musical ditties and transitions for it, so again, it feels really right. It feels really me. But as a result, unfortunately, the channel's sort of taken a nosedive. But it actually came at kind of an opportune time because I was feeling like I was falling a little bit into the cliches of the genre and this style of video. And I know that album reviews are sort of at their end. I feel like that there's definitely a turning point in the near future for music discussion online and on YouTube specifically. And I want to be attentive. I want to tune into that new stream, wherever that's headed. And think in a more innovative way about what the desires are, what the needs are, what the interests are of this market and this audience, whatever audience there actually is. The one thing I know, the guiding light, the North Star, if you will, is that music is still really my heart. So I'm open to your thoughts, and I'm sorry for wasting this much of your time when you just wanted to hear about some new albums. Top 30 albums of 2019, I'll do half of it now, I'll do half of it later, might do some honorable mentions, some disappointments in there. Here we go. Since Merriweather Post Pavilion a decade ago, the animals of Animal Collective have burst apart in an anticlimactic diaspora, kind of like one of those underwhelming sparkler fireworks. Sure, there were some side projects back in the band's heyday, but those albums didn't feel like the members' chief creative interests at the time. And I think that Deacon's debut album, Sleep Cycle from 2016, is probably my favorite of the past 4 or 5 years from these guys. But I think it was pretty clear that Panda Bear seemed the most likely to strike in 2019. And strike he did. 3 strikes with buoys. To my shock, to my awe, it was Avey Tare's Cows on Hourglass Pond that took the crown this year and sneaks in at number 30. This album's so much more dynamic than Painted With or Buoys, and a lot more bright and melodic than pretty much any Avey Tare album. Saturdays Again is a huge breath of early morning Alaskan air compared to the cluttered and sensory overloading stuff of Dave Portner's past. And Casey Yours cashes in on this simplified approach again, giving us Dave's most succinct and catchy melody since Centipede Hurts. Yeah, and it's pretty difficult not to reference a band's past that's like a decade past their prime, especially a prime so packed with incredible albums. And the reason Cows on Hourglass Pond isn't a little bit higher on this list is because it really does feel like a return to form rather than this adventurous step forward. Although it could mark a revelation in his personal life because the lyrics are so positive. There's so many whimsical, playful lines in here. As usual, this is a quirky, a propulsive, experimental pop record filled with samples and found sounds, but not at all forced and not feeling ostentatiously obscure. There are metal bands. And then there's Opeth. The Swedes have been going at this clean, melodic, progressive rock thing for a while now, and while there are probably more exciting chapters in the band's career, I'm still holding out hope for another Pale Communion before the well runs dry. Yeah, it's possibly another artist over the creative hill. Opeth with their 13th album, the dark but playful In Cauda Venenum. I love the symphonic grandiosity of songs like Continuum or All Things Will Pass, as Ackerfeld bellows out these storybook tales. The song Dignity exemplifies the menacing yet triumphant progressions that make the band's music so powerful in the most religious sense of the word. Every song musically is pretty similar, like they've dropped the folky pastoral pieces from Sorceress and I guess there's still a little bit in there, but definitely not as much. It's a little bit heavier, but the songs do tend to bleed into each other a little bit, which is probably my one complaint. Except the Garroter, which reminds me of something Act 5-ish from The Deer Hunter. Just the majesty of Opeth really shines through on this album. Ackerfeldt's writing is fantastic, and it really betrays any sense of bleakness or a nihilistic worldview that bands with these death metal roots tend to wear on their sleeve. And number 28 is an album that surprisingly to me isn't so well represented in the cream of the crop, the cultural elite music critics and music sources out there. The Pitchforks, the Rolling Stones. It's also not on the NPR list. I guess that one isn't as surprising. It's my favorite pop punk album since probably the last Into It Over It album, and that is the Toronto band Pup with Morbid Stuff. Morbid Stuff is chock full of sunshiny tenor melodies and half-assed gang vocals. It kind of is the poster child of this genre. It is the peak execution. It turns every cliche of the genre up to 11, but it does so in a way that's just so consistent in its writing and its quality. The album epitomizes that SpongeBob meme, the "You like Krabby Patties, don't you, Squidward?" with the face all up at the top. As my cynical crossed arms are slowly pulled apart and I grab a slice of pizza, pull on my crew neck. I love the country-tinged vocals on Scorpion Hill, and Bloody Mary Kate and Ashley's urgent time shifts and whiny guitar lead. But it's the self-deprecating badassery of full-blown meltdown that really does it for me. It's kind of similar to that last Opeth album in the sense that it just reveals sort of the irony of this message and this worldview that's purported to be godless and nihilistic and meaningless and problem fetishizing. And I mean, this music is so saturated with meaning that you can't deny it. At number 27 is a 90s wash debut album from LA-based band Goon. It's called Heaven is Humming. Vocalist Kenny Becker has this sinus condition where polyps grow and they actually mask his senses. So there are periods of his life when his senses are completely dulled. I mean, I can't imagine that as a musician, but this album is just a testament to his endurance, and you know, unfortunately surgery is going to be a continuous reality for him. So the J Mascis-esque delivery on this album is all the more impressive. Goon has a pretty standard setup, like it's pretty by the numbers, but they're doing this 90s Nirvana grunge and Dinosaur Jr. alt-rock sort of thing better than just about anyone at the moment. Heaven is Humming is packed with these slow-tempoed romps like Cammy at Night with its blissful, drawn-out, harmonized hooks, or Critter with its catatonic seventh chords, which kind of lull you into a stupor and then all of a sudden jump into this 8-bit video game soundtrack heaven for the last minute. I love these softer moments like this or like Snoqualmie, which really evokes the tranquility of the Pacific Northwest. Besides that 90s rock stuff, this is very similar to the band the Besnard Lakes, if you've heard them, with the really drawn out, lethargic vocal lines, kind of Beach Boys-esque in a sense. It's a little heavier, a little bit grungier and dirtier than that though. British IDM heroes Plaid have been bleeping and blooping since 1991, and at number 26 is their 10th record, Polymer. I dabble in electronic music, but I have very little expertise and almost no historical context whatsoever. I remember the album Digging Remedy coming out in 2016, but beyond that, anything before that I really don't know, and I just know that they're a significant name in this style. Polymer doesn't seem to fulfill the promise of a theme at all, and it doesn't have much cohesion, but I really do enjoy the diversity of the track list, even with some of the repetitive metallic gurgling and dark trances you'd expect in this type of electronic music. The 1-2 punch of Drowned Sea and then The Pale Moth is a perfect example of the band's sense of tension and release. They sort of dangle the bait out in front of you and then snatch it away just as they're about to reach the melodic payoff. There are very few melodic standouts or hooks that really stay with me, actually, but I feel like the layers of depth with a headphone listen are sometimes beyond any of my typical jazz, rock, pop sort of fare. The song Dancers is a more accessible, a little bit more cinematic moment, while Narula has more of a sleek, taiko sort of vibe. This album's a great palate cleanser for me. My favorite tracks are Narula, The Drowned Sea, and the closer Praise, which breaks out the acoustics for a smooth and organic finish. At number 25 is seemingly one of the last neo-psych revival bands that hasn't given way to poptimism, and that is the Brazilian band Boogarins with their fourth album Sombrou Duvida, which I think means something about shadows. Shadow Doubt. Sick. Boogarins find a way to obfuscate their pop leanings with experimental editing and excessive haziness. I can hear the songs Dyslexia or Trance or Nos being played by a band like Tame Impala with a little bit more transparency and presence and pizzazz. But I love how much more depth and mystery there is with Boogarin's production while still coming through on refrains that deliver something more punchy and immediate. The title track gives this juxtaposition between these visceral hooks and this more drugged, glitchy experimentalism. Another lovely and bizarre album from Boogarins, and really a no-brainer for this list. At number 24 is this collaboration between a Dutch orchestra that's tied to so many of my favorite artists like Jacob Collier and Snarky Puppy. I didn't see this coming at all, but this time it's with an electronic artist from the Brainfeeder label started by Flying Lotus. It's Jameszoo collaborating with Metropole Orkest and the English conductor James Buckley. The album's called Melkweg. Melkweg is a popular venue in Amsterdam, and the cover art, I love it, with this picture of the orchestra and then these splatters of red and gold paint kind of glob chunkily atop. Adverb. Huh. And this album's greatest trait is exemplified right there. It sinks you into a vast ocean of sound and then transports your gaze to something right in front of your face. The song Soup does this to perfection, launching you on this jazz fusion odyssey with sax blasting out anguished cries, and then just snapping you back with this sharp, minimalist R&B string part and this tight little hi-hat and rim groove. Jameszoo gave us a journey for sure, and it's not for the faint of heart, but it's still very lush and heavenly. And number 23 is an artist that couldn't possibly improve on their last record, which was the spotless and seamless Modern Country from 2016. An acoustic guitar album born from the American primitive finger-picked tradition of people like John Fahey or Leo Kottke. And that is my favorite artist in this genre, William Tyler, with an album not quite as good, but still very good. Goes West is the name of the album, and it's a little bit less experimental, a little bit more of a straight shooter from Tyler. I really wish he'd expand on stuff that sounds like Gone Clear from his last album, that electroacoustic style, a little bit more ambient. But Failsafe is a bop, man. That is a feel-good song right there. That reminds me a little bit of Hobbiton with its steady stomp and rusticness. Smooth and carefree songs like Eventual Surrender mirror the pilgrimage he made from Nashville to Los Angeles for this album. No one captures feelings of contentedness, of solitude, of melancholy, of tranquility quite like William Tyler. My favorites here are Failsafe and Venus in Aquarius and Call Me When I'm Breathing Again. Next up is apparently my most listened to artist of the year according to Spotify, which I didn't expect, but it's definitely one of my most anticipated albums of the year and one that definitely has grown on me substantially since reviewing. And that is Bibio's Ribbons. This album is next level warm and fuzzy. Bibio plays guitar-based folktronica with touches of psych and soul and ambient music, and this album maximizes the classical, the nostalgic elements of his diverse style, but he manages to fit in these wonderfully unexpected moments like the trip-hop R&B inspired Before or the Latin shuffle of Old Graffiti. There is nothing like this in music. It's so singular in that sense, and really no one but Bibio could even replicate it. I couldn't help but get swept up in the exquisite warmth of number 21, and that is Jessica Pratt's third album, Quiet Signs. This is an extremely refined singer-songwriter sound. Pratt's always sought to escape the pastiche of pastoral folk like Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell kind of comparisons. But she really has her own voice and her own delivery that condones any of the obvious similarities. There's an ever-present hiss of the room that this was recorded in, and it kind of gives the soul-sustaining effect of driving by a snow-laden cottage and seeing a Christmas tree through the frosty windows. Most of the appeal of this album is actually through that mood and through the tone that it transports you to. Through softly strummed nylon strings and buttery layers of reverb-dipped harmonies. But that's not to say that the compositions aren't interesting and sophisticated as well, like the song Fare Thee Well, which is a definite highlight for me and just has this gripping transition into the chorus as she moves from these impressionistic wanderings to more personal confessions. Jessica Pratt is really onto something here with that strangely alluring Mickey Mouse voice and the opulent but breezy aesthetic. The Philadelphian synth-led and guitarless rock band Sunstep carries us into the top 20 on this list with their jaunty third album, Fossilillies. This is electronic prog pop with more emphasis on melody than on texture or mathy noodling. The song Saucy is a great deep cut with, speaking of Animal Collective, it's kind of got that painted with bounce. While the closer Know My Own is more jazz-centric and subtle and employs these huge tempo changes, which the band does really well over the course of the album. I love the sputtering rhythm on Pluto Chakra, which gradually swells with anxiety, or the Eagle Call and the pentatonic piano on Vintage Piano. Vintage Piano, pretty sure that's a garage band setting. The song Sesame Boys has whiffs of the band Phoenix with its galloping optimism. Fossilillies isn't a lot more than just a to-the-point, but very dynamic, very catchy, experimental rock album. Well, the band Chairlift is pretty much kaput after their best album, Moth. But out of the ashes comes a phoenix, a bird, a plane, a Caroline Polachek solo album. It's Pang at number 19. Caroline Polachek has done her art pop and glitzy electronic production thing for a long time with Chairlift and also solo, but never with the cinematic effect of this record. This album is a gut punch of relatable sentiments punctuated by Polachek's melodramatic 3-octave range. Like on the song I Give Up, which is seemingly about a relationship that just asks too much. Where Caroline's breaths are accentuated with an exasperated reverb. Or on the title track, which has a trendier, trap-influenced groove and releases into the lusty thrill of chaotic love on the chorus. It really feels like she wrote these lyrics in the heat of the moment instead of pondering them for 2 or more years. It gives it a much more humble human touch in spite of what's a pretty crystalline presentation. I love the track New Normal, which seems to change keys every 30 seconds. Look at Me Now is a refreshingly light and folksy centerpiece, bringing the otherworldly and spectacular sounds of the first half of the album a little bit down to earth. Insomnia and Parachutes are 2 other highlights which have a very similar mood, very brooding, very cathartic, a little gloomy, but with these spellbinding vocal climaxes that really stand apart this year as far as just pure ecstasy in a song. The next band on this list is the closest thing to the Canterbury prog scene you'll get in 2019. At number 18, it's the band Jouis with their second album, Bahn. It's Jouis. You tell me how to say it. This is just one of my favorite sounds. I mean, psychedelic, jazzy, but still with strong songs at the core. The songs Sinking Statues and Wilton's Garden bring the hardest hitting psych here, but are still littered with pensive jazz chord changes. While Turtle has this mellotron groove straight off a Soft Machine record, which sparkles and shines into philosophical musings and eventually this bucolic verse part that's played in reverse. The song Cat is this lovely little reflective piano etude that breaks the album in half. The backside of the album opens up with even more space and extended jams, but it never feels overly heady or repetitive. It really moves along with almost kind of linearly. I love that perpetual motion of Bahn, and really the concern for the listener too. I mean, they provide all these catchy melodies and riffs that give the lush textures weight and staying power. Oh, honey. Honey, honey, honey. Yeah. You like this one too, bud. It's your favorite. Lifelong Danish buds Jonathan Bremer and Morten McCoy roll in at number 17. It's Bremer, McCoy with Utopia. Utopia is by definition imagined. It's a place that doesn't exist. And a melody-rich instrumental piano album with a little jazz, a little dub, on David Byrne's record label. I mean, that's pretty much Utopia for me. I feel like it's the kind of elevator music that can go easily unnoticed, and so I kind of feel like I've unearthed something. I'm the elevator king, aren't I? The song Salme is the swirling and methodical track alternating between these slithering mellotron and piano leads, and it's very hymn-like, while the song Hoida is a little bit more mischievous with this syncopated bass line and these fluttering ambient twiddles. There are definitely elements of ambient music with these tones that linger on and pulsate in velvety, serene ways. But again, every single track has a clear melody and doesn't overstay its welcome. This one would definitely be a little bit higher if it had a little bit more variety and dynamic contrast. But as it stands, it's a deeply intimate listen that feels like a really good counselor, like someone who instantly really knows and understands you. Dude, it's drooling all over me. Number 16 put out a series of immaculate dream pop EPs before her debut record here, and all with a very distinctive brand and identity and aesthetic. It really was only a matter of time until the alternative mainstream caught on to this and, you know, the Pitchfork kids. That is Amber Bain's project, The Japanese House, with Good at Falling. I love that she included some of her best tracks up to this point on this album and just reworked them like Lilo or Saw You in a Dream. It really helps make the album just a better listening experience overall. There's an impenetrable sleekness that draws you to the flame, and it's just impossibly shiny. It's like a dream where you accidentally elbow your grandma's precious porcelain vase to the ground and no. But instead of shattering, it springs up and down to a chill electro pop beat. Yeah, I take that as you will. And that does it. That's 30 through 16 of my top albums of 2019. And I'm coming at you very soon with some more. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you saw some stuff that you haven't seen on other lists. And as always, thank you so much for watching.